Imagine standing on this bustling street corner where the whole concept of a border just completely dissolves.
Yeah, totally vanishes.
Right. Like you can literally walk from Uruguay into Brazil mid-sentence. One second you're speaking Spanish and the next you're, seamlessly swapping to Portuguese.
All while carrying your thermos of hot water, right?
Exactly. You've got your hot water for your mate and you're grabbing a fresh Brazilian cheese bread from a vendor. There are no walls. There are no checkpoints at all.
It's just this vibrant, totally fluid, overlapping reality.
It is, and it completely shatters how we usually think about countries or, just lines on a map.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to rethink what actually defines a nation's identity when those geographic boundaries are invisible. Like, what holds it together?
And that is exactly what we are decoding today for you listening.
Oh.
We are taking a deep dive into the cultural DNA of Uruguay.
And we're doing it in a very unconventional way.
We really are. We aren't using census data or diplomatic histories. We actually got our hands on a song toolkit.
Which is such a cool concept.
It's amazing. It's this massive collection of research compiled by a group of creatives. They were led by a researcher named Bannock, and they took on this wild mission.
Right, distilling the entire essence of Uruguay into music and lyrics.
Exactly. So instead of asking what Uruguay exports, they asked, what does Uruguay actually sound like?
Because to figure out the rhythm of a place,
Yeah.
you really have to look at how people move, how they work, how they argue.
How they survive, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Looking at these notes is basically like listening to the isolated audio stems of a music track.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. You're in the studio and you're hearing just the isolated bass line or just the drum track of Uruguay before they all get mixed together into the final song of the nation.
And to understand that final mix, Bannock's team realized you absolutely have to start with the bass line, the acoustic foundational rhythm.
Which takes us to the deep rural interior, the pampas.
Right, the engine room.
Let's talk about that engine room. When you look at the pampas, you're looking at these endless, just seemingly infinite grasslands.
It is the foundational soul of the country. I mean, this is where the Charrúa indigenous history is rooted.
Right, and it's the landscape that forged José Gervasio Artigas, too.
Exactly, the central hero of Uruguayan rural resistance. The psychology of this region is entirely dictated by its sheer scale and, well, its isolation.
You really feel that isolation in the creative pitch for this region. They focus heavily on the ombu tree.
Oh, the ombu, yeah. That's a crucial symbol.
It is. You have this massive umbrella-like tree that just stands totally alone on the plains. And that environment is what forged the gaucho culture.
Which revolves around cattle, horses, and survival.
Right. We're talking about an existence that prioritizes honor, extreme simplicity, and this, fierce, unspoken loyalty to the dirt itself.
And you can picture the classic imagery, right?
Oh, for sure. The loose bombaches, the baggy pants.
The wide-brimmed hats, the facon tucked into the belt.
The traditional knife, yeah. But the toolkit focuses heavily on the psychology behind that aesthetic.
Well, because the aesthetic is just a byproduct of how they survived.
Yeah.
You have to understand the actual mechanism of that survival.
Which makes me want to ask you, we always hear about cowboy cultures globally, right? From the American West to the Australian outback.
Oh, absolutely. The lone cowboy is a universal trope.
Right. But based on these notes, what makes the Uruguayan gaucho specifically different? Is it just the mate and the facon, or is it a fundamentally different relationship with the land?
It's definitely the relationship with the land.
Yeah.
In the American West, the cowboy myth we all know is hyper-individualistic.
Right. Conquering the frontier.
Exactly. The Lone Ranger imposing his will on nature. But the Uruguayan gaucho, at least as framed in this cultural deep dive, operates on a totally different mechanism.
Which is what?
It's about communal survival in the quiet. It's not about conquering. It's about enduring together.
Oh, wow. Which brings up a fascinating point from the notes about their daily rituals, like gathering around the asado, the slow-cooked BBQ, or passing the mate in a circle.
Right. It's not just about eating or drinking. It's a social leveling mechanism.
Oh, so?
Think about the physical act of sharing mate. You have a single gourd, a single metal straw, the bombilla,
Right.
and it gets passed around a circle of people. It forces a pause. It forces eye contact.
So everyone is on the same level.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if you are the wealthy estancia owner or just the hired ranch hand. When you are in that circle, you are equals.
That is so interesting. That daily repetitive ritual bred a deeply ingrained sense of egalitarianism.
And that equality would later fuel the entire country's political evolution, honestly.
And it fuels their art, too. The toolkit highlights the
The
payadors.
traveling singer poets, yeah.
Right. They engage in these complex improvisational lyrical duels. It is so reflective. Like, they aren't just out there taming cattle. They are actively making art out of the isolation.
They're filling the empty space of the pampas with philosophy.
It's an acoustic rhythm, and it's sustaining. Bannock actually leaves a very poignant note about this in the sources.
Oh, about the coast versus the interior.
Yeah. He says, the coast might shine, but the interior sustains. It is the engine room of Uruguayan identity.
Which is so true. The massive meatpacking plants, the coastal cities, the modern economy, none of that exists without the relentless, quiet pulse of the estancias.
The interior is the invisible baseline that keeps the whole song in key.
Absolutely.
But, the cattle may roam free in those quiet, slow-moving interior plains, but eventually they have to flow south toward the coast.
And when they do, the audio stem completely changes.
Completely. We leave the acoustic guitar behind, and we hit the noisy, gritty machinery that built modern Uruguay. Which brings us directly to the industrial belt.
The Southern Industrial Corridor. So we're talking about around Montevideo, Canelones, and San Jose.
And the contrast is just visceral. You trade the open sky and the ombu tree for the frigorificos.
The massive meatpacking plants, yeah. And the dense ports, factories, all of that.
Right. If the interior is a slow acoustic rhythm, the south is a driving, heavy drum beat. The identity here is fiercely working class.
And it was heavily built by European immigrants, mostly Italian and Spanish, who just poured into the ports.
Right. They arrived and went straight to work on the factory floors. Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though. This region feels like a classic American Rust Belt city.
Oh, like a Detroit or a Pittsburgh.
Exactly. But instead of being powered by steel and cars, it's powered by beef, candombe drums, and this fierce social democracy.
That is a really solid comparison. But there is a crucial psychological difference in there.
What's that?
Well, Detroit was built on manufacturing expendable consumer goods, cars. But Montevideo was built on sustenance, beef.
Oh, right. Processing the lifeblood of the country.
Exactly. The mechanism of processing the wealth of the land creates a very specific type of labor psychology. These workers knew how vital they were.
And because of that egalitarian seed planted in the interior, when they concentrated in the city, they demanded a voice.
They really did. The sheer concentration of labor in the frigorificos sparked massive unionization in the 20th century.
The workers who built the wealth wanted a share of it. But the toolkit specifically focuses on how this industrial boom collided violently with politics, right?
Yes, the dark period of the dictatorship from 1973 to 1985.
Right. The regime took power and tried to completely silence that working-class drumbeat. They repressed the unions and tried to mute that collective voice.
They tried to mute it, but you just can't erase a rhythm that is that deeply embedded.
And what the creatives brilliantly capture in their notes is how the culture developed rogue frequencies to bypass that censorship.
Yes, the resilience of the labor identity survived through the art.
So let's talk about those rogue frequencies, because this is where the music metaphor becomes quite literal. We have murga and candombe.
Murga is just incredible. It's this satirical, choral, political carnival theater.
On the surface, it just looks like festive entertainment, right?
Yeah, right. But mechanically, it was the voice of the working class critiquing society. During the dictatorship, murga became a masterclass in reading between the lines.
They used heavy theatrical makeup, double entendres, satire.
Exactly. To deliver political dissent right under the noses of the censors. It was union solidarity, just masked in a carnival rhythm.
Wow, and then there's candombe. The creative team put a massive highlight on this in the toolkit. They noted, if your song lacks rhythm, borrow from candombe's heartbeat.
It's the Afro-Uruguayan drumming tradition. You hear it echoing down the streets of working-class neighborhoods, especially places like Lateja in Montevideo.
It's the ultimate unmutable frequency.
It really is. It is the sound of marginalized communities claiming space. You have dozens of drummers walking down the street, locking into this intense, unified polyrhythm.
The notes say it literally shakes the windows.
Oh, it does. It is the physical manifestation of collective resilience. And when democracy finally returned, that fierce working-class solidarity is what helped rebuild a strong welfare state.
Okay, so we have the quiet, poetic bass line of the interior, and we have the driving collective drums of the industrial coast.
But what happens at the edges?
Exactly. If the south is dense industry and the interior is isolated, what happens when Uruguay physically meets the outside world? Let's look at the borders, starting with the rivers in the west.
The western edge, which is defined by the Rio de la Plata and the Uruguay River.
Right, places like Colonia de Sacramento, Salto, and Paysandú.
And a border defined by a major waterway has a completely different relationship with time than a landlocked region. It
It-
forces a totally different pace.
We see that starkly with Colonia del Sacramento, founded in 1680 by Portugal. And the notes point out it was a massive geopolitical headache.
Oh, a constant tug of war.
Spain and Portugal played a violent, centuries-long game over this strategic port. It changed hands constantly.
It was a highly coveted military prize.
Okay, wait, but this is a fascinating historical contradiction. You're saying a place that spent centuries as a bloody imperial war zone is now famous for its slow vibe.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's known today as a UNESCO site, with its cobblestone Calle de los Suspiros, the Street of Sighs, pouring tannic wine, feeling totally frozen in time.
It seems like a contradiction, I know.
How does a literal war zone evolve into a meditation retreat? It just doesn't
Right.
track logically.
It's actually a direct result of its geography and its architecture. When the empires finally stopped fighting, what remained was this incredibly heavy, irregular Portuguese stonework.
Mixed with rigid Spanish grid planning, right?
Exactly. It was physically built to be impenetrable, which gave it a feeling of intense permanence. But more importantly, the economic engine of the country just moved away.
Ah, it shifted south to the deep water port of Montevideo.
Right. So Colonia was essentially bypassed by the Industrial Revolution.
Mm.
The meatpacking plants and the heavy industry went to Montevideo, and Colonia was just left alone with the river.
And river time is not factory time.
Not at all. The river dictates a slow, steady, cyclical rhythm. The creatives captured this beautifully, pitching lyrics about shifting tides in a place where time stands still.
The violence washed away, and only the heavy stone and the slow water remained.
Yeah.
But as you trace that river further north, to places like Salto and Paysandú, that romanticized river culture shifts into something much more rugged.
Right, because up there, the river isn't just a scenic backdrop, it's a working engine.
You have the hot springs like Termas del Demon, but you also have the Salto Grande Dam.
And a highly resilient history, like the Siege of Paysandú. That was a brutal, defining moment of national resilience.
The river provides fish, it facilitates trade, and it dictates the agricultural cycles of the eucalyptus forests and citrus groves.
It's less weekend getaway and more hardworking frontier community.
And the audio stem here has its own distinct regional flavor, too. The toolkit dives into the specific Rio Platense dialect quirks in the West.
Oh, the language quirks are great.
They use the pronoun vos constantly. There's a heavy, almost musical Italian rhythm to the way they speak. And this is where you hear the slang bo all the time.
Right, bo. It basically means dude or hey. It's
not-
highly casual, highly communal.
Like bo past the mate.
Exactly. The core theme of the river region, from the notes, is basically life flows like the river. Steady, communal, and rooted in tradition.
All right, so while the western border is defined by a river that creates a very clear line between nations, like you know exactly when you leave Uruguay and enter Argentina,
The northern border does the exact opposite.
it completely dissolves. Which brings us to our final stop in this cultural deep dive, Rivera and the northern frontier.
This is arguably the most dynamic audio stem in the entire mix. We are talking about the twin border cities, Rivera in Uruguay and Santana do Livramento in Brazil.
The creative pitch for this region literally says no walls, just vibes.
Which is so accurate. It is a strategic border zone that evolved into a massive duty-free shopping hub.
But culturally, it is entirely fluid.
It really is a stunning case study in human geography. When you draw an arbitrary political line across an endless grassland, but the topography is exactly the same on both sides.
The people living there eventually just ignore the line.
Exactly. The identity in Rivera is a seamless, functional blend.
You see it most clearly in the language, right?
Yeah.
Portuñol.
Yes. And it isn't just someone struggling to speak a second language.
No, it has evolved into its own organic dialect. The notes highlight how someone will swap between saying "tá tudo bem" and "todo bien" mid-sentence,
Without a single stutter.
and they are perfectly understood by everyone around them.
And that fluidity extends to everything up there. It's the food-sharing Uruguayan mate alongside Brazilian pão de queijo, the cheese bread.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And the fashion, too. Mixing traditional rural gaucho bombachas with, like, colorful Brazilian streetwear.
So what does this all mean? Imagine a cultural Venn diagram, but instead of just sharing a few traits, the overlapping middle section has actually become its own distinct, thriving universe.
Right.
It's not a hard border at all. It's like a zipper that's permanently half open. The fabric is just woven together.
A permanently half-open zipper. That is a fantastic way to visualize it. And if we bring it back to the music, the overlapping tracks here are wild. You have the Afro-Uruguayan candombe and the slow gaucho milonga bumping right up against Brazilian samba.
It is a total polyrhythm.
Yeah.
The creatives nailed it when they noted that the drums up here talk louder than borders ever could.
It fundamentally challenges our concept of a nation-state. Up there, your identity isn't defined by which side of the line you sleep on. It's defined by the shared experience of living in the overlap.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final mix. We've isolated all these audio stems from Bannock's research. To summarize, we have the quiet, acoustic, egalitarian bass line of the interior gaucho.
We have the loud, driving, unmutable drum beat of the fierce industrial worker in the South.
We have the steady, timeless, flowing string section of the historic river dweller in the West.
And we have the vibrant, polyrhythmic, blended harmony of the bilingual border citizen in the North.
Uruguay isn't just one thing. It's a complex, beautiful synthesis. But if you look closely at how these creatives mapped it out, there is a master bus.
There's a glue holding all of these disparate regions together to make them sound like one song.
Right. No matter where you go in that country, whether you are a quiet hand on the plains, a union dock worker in Montevideo, a winemaker in Colonia, or a bilingual shop owner in Rivera, you are engaging in the exact same rituals.
The mechanisms of connection. The daily ritual of sharing the mate. The communal fire of the asado. And this understated but deep-rooted pride.
Those rituals are the true cultural DNA. They transcend the geography, they are understated, they force you to pause, and they remind you that you belong to the collective.
Absolutely.
And for you listening, by examining Uruguay through the lens of this creative toolkit, you now possess a high-definition, multi-layered understanding of the country.
An understanding that even seasoned travelers usually completely miss.
Exactly. You aren't just looking at the tourist brochures, you actually know how the song was mixed.
Do you understand why the drum beat sounds the way it does? And where the bass line came from?
So, we'll leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own. Think about that mate cup being passed around a circle, forging a national sense of equality. Or that lone ombu tree shaping a philosophy of survival.
Right.
If someone were trying to write a song about your hometown or your region, what is that one quiet, everyday ritual or symbol that perfectly explains your culture to an outsider without using any words at all?